Hi, ladies. This is Lutz Herrington. You're with us here on Women Surviving Financial Abuse and part of Strong Women Thriving. I've got a super exciting guest for you today on this interview. I've been waiting and waiting to talk to John Faucher. Did I say that right, John?
Faucher, yeah.
Faucher, excuse me. Love that French name. So today I'm going to do a brief interview with John, who is an attorney. And my understanding of your history is that you started practicing tax and bankruptcy law as an individual in your own firm back in 2008. But prior to that, you were a tax attorney for the IRS for 10 years. Is that all correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And during that time, you defended the IRS in tax court audits and represented the IRS when it was a creditor in bankruptcies. Is that all true? Oh my God.
That's true, yes. I like to say that we got the pound of flesh out of bankrupt debtors.
Oh, yeah, the
yes.
IRS is kind of mean, right?
Yeah.
You got to be the mean guy? Is that
kind of fun times, yeah.
Yeah. So, and your marketing, you say most tax debt can be discharged in bankruptcy. And it kind of sounds like that combination is how you ended up kind of flipping sides and going out on your own and specializing in tax and bankruptcy. Is that a fair way to look at this?
Yeah, pretty much. When I was at the IRS, I had a very good sense of what my future looked like. And I guess I was looking for more adventure in life. And so I flipped sides and going out and finding, doing marketing, finding clients is something that really appeals to me. And I had the expertise of knowing what debts get discharged, what don't. How do you deal with the IRS? What buttons to push to get what done and things like that. So, so that's more or less why I went out on my own, to get more adventure.
More adventure. Okay, great. And your trusty sidekick, I understand, is Sebastian, your cat. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yes, and I have not let him into the room today as part of the interview. He's a little bit of a attention-seeking hog, but yes.
I understand.
Yeah.
Mine came in and went out. I'm like, you can get a snack, and now you're going back out. You're not going to interrupt this interview, right? Love the remote world that we live in. Our pets become part of the office. Yes, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
I understand that. And so from what you've told me or what I've read about you, that this kind of a specialization, tax and bankruptcy in California, is a very small fraction of those certified by the California Bar Association. Is that correct? Only 5%.
Something like that. I don't keep real tabs on what what percentage of attorneys are specialized. But the people who do tax and bankruptcy work were a small little bunch of people who all know each other. And and interestingly, my daughter ran into an old friend of hers from high school who is now in law school, and she was talking with her and said, "Oh, so you're in law school? What kind of law do you want to do?" And the woman said, "I want to do tax and bankruptcy law." And I'm like astounded to hear this, because nobody in law school wants to do this. It's
not a glamorous section.
It's not a glamorous thing.
Where the big money is. It's not where you can't become rich and famous doing this. It sounds like it's
right. It's not international and environmental or anything like that. It's not
right. Well, I'm glad somebody else is taking up the reins so that there's more of you in the pool, because I'm sure there's a high demand for it.
Yeah,
I don't doubt that at all. Having been through bankruptcy myself and know that it's not fun, and you do need an attorney to guide you through it. Definitely, it's not something you want to tackle on your own.
Right.
So, so John Duffy met you and found out that you handle innocent spouse cases.
Yeah.
And I guess he thought that you and I should connect, knowing what I do and the group I'm working with and what we're doing with Strong Women Thriving, and where we're trying to really help women recover from financial abuse is really the mainstay of my focus. But anything related to financial abuse and helping women with resources is really where I'm trying to go with this. And I think John knew that when he introduced us.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of focus on that today, the innocent spouse law, because I hadn't even heard about it, was not something I experienced. but it has come up in our group. So when we talked before and I met you, I was like, don't tell me, because I want to hear it now. And I've been waiting for
Okay.
a long time
Right.
to understand this. So please take the floor. Tell us, what is the
Sure.
innocent spouse law? Tell us a little bit about it, how it works, things like that,
Yeah.
please.
So, if you file a joint return and you sign the joint return, you are on the hook for 100% of what the tax is based on that return. And the IRS can come after you or can come after your spouse. It's the IRS's discretion. But if you sign your name to that return, you're responsible for 100% of the tax that's due and owing. And if you get audited and they increase your tax, you're still responsible for 100% of what's due and owing. But if you can prove that you didn't know what was on the tax return, or you didn't have reason to know that this tax wouldn't be paid, for instance, I signed my name and it says $50,000 is owing, but I thought that he was going to go ahead and pay it because he told me he would, and I didn't have access to the books and records. That's something where you can do a petition to the IRS and say, I'd like to be relieved of the $50,000 that's due and owing on this return, because I had no knowledge that this was not going to be paid, or I had no knowledge of the business dealings that led to the audit, that led to the extra $100,000 being attached to my tax return, because he didn't share with me any information, things like that, and the IRS will take this petition and will consider it for 3 to 18 months and then come back with a decision. And I've found that generally they seem to be pretty fair and reasonable, and they, pretty much, they haven't come up with a lot of decisions that I really deeply disagree with one way or the other. And it all goes to one central processing place in Covington, Kentucky, across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. And they, and they have a team of people who do this, and day in, day out. Sounds like, one of those horrible jobs at the IRS where you're constantly reviewing the details of a failed marriage, and, did this, is this person entitled to be relieved of her tax debt? And I say her tax debt because, probably 95 to 97% of these cases are women trying to get away from what their husband shackled them with.
Yeah,
So,
well, I would agree with you. It's probably predominantly women going through divorce who've been blindsided by a tax bill they thought either didn't know existed in the first place or didn't realize it wasn't paid. It goes to all kinds of things. The other piece that we see a lot of in financial abuse is fraud, in that the spouse could have signed the signature for the wife. The husband could have signed the wife's signature. We see that. That's come up a couple of times as far as electronic signing nowadays. It's so easy with electronic signing to go ahead and go in there. But how does a woman prove something like that? I mean, I haven't been through it, and I'm just like, how do you convince the IRS that this has happened to you? Because it feels a lot like hearsay, and like they're just going to go, well, just because you say you didn't know, is there a formula? Is there some steps they do? I'm just curious.
Well, and if you're going to claim that your name or that your signature was forged on the return, that's a very different thing, actually, from the innocent spouse relief.
Okay, good to know.
And you're basically saying the return is invalid because I didn't sign it.
So you're claiming more like identity fraud at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a different topic.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's obviously very related. So what you've got to prove is, you basically have to somehow prove that your signature was not on here, and that you didn't ratify it, you wouldn't have signed it because, you owe taxes. And so, is this tax return basically fundamentally, is it fundamentally honest, right?
Right.
It's in your interest to sign the tax return and get it filed rather than not be filing a tax return.
Sure.
So the IRS is going to look at a lot of other indicia to see, are we going to think about, whether this person really did have her signature forged on the tax return? Because, if she's saying that my signature was forged, well, then the next question is, if you hadn't forged your signature, what would you have done?
Right.
And if you said, file this tax return, the IRS is going to say, who cares, right? but
then you owe the tax, whether you.
then you owe the tax. Right. Yeah. I mean, so
Okay.
you're basically
Okay.
ratifying the forgery. But if you're saying, no, I would have done some, this and this and this. And hey, look, I actually filed a married filing separate tax return. This thing was done without my knowledge. Then
Right.
you're showing that, I'm stepping up, I'm being responsible for my taxes, and somebody else is stealing my identity. Right.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to the innocent spouse situation. If a woman had her, did sign the tax return, believed that it was either paid or was told, whatever, then it goes to this department, the petition goes to this department and they review it. But how does a woman prove that she thought it was going to be paid or was paid or whatever?
There's a bunch of, basically she has to tell her story. Are you still there? You're looking frozen.
Yeah,
so.
Sorry. I think for a minute. Did you hear that question?
Yeah, I heard the question. How do you prove that you thought the tax return was going to be filed? Well, you have to tell your story, and there's a lot of he said, she said, and the IRS is going to go check with the other spouse to see whether this checks out. But you're gonna say things like, my husband kept me in the dark about finances, or I knew nothing about what's going on. My education is high school. I didn't have a college degree. Things like this. They look at they ask a whole bunch of questions that go to the financial ins and outs, financial dealings between the two parties. And they look at it and say, does this make sense? This person has a PhD in astrophysics, but she couldn't be bothered to look at the tax return.
Right.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But if
is it plausible? Shall we say?
Is it plausible? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's a judgment call by the person, but these people are trained to sort of root out like common things. Like we see women who get lied to all the time, and they come out, they're it's a tragic situation and all over the world. And of course, in this country, it's particular to tax fraud. And, if the spouse didn't pay, the IRS is going after them. The woman's in a divorce. It becomes one more burden she may have to carry. But this is a possible recourse or a way of getting that tax burden, taken off of her, basically, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And, so, we've talked about the incidents where, there's a $50,000 that should have been paid, but wasn't paid. But, there's more to innocent spouse than that. There's also, you get the audit, you get the audit notice that says that that your tax debt is going up by $170,000. And I've got that in another case where, the, husband and wife are divorced, but IRS, for the 2017 tax year, the IRS went and did an audit of the husband's LLC, and he was in some kind of partnership with some other guys.
Okay.
They audit that LLC, so they're not actually auditing the husband and the wife,
Right.
but the way these are pass-through entities. So what happens at that audit rolls down to the individual partners. And so it rolled down, they basically tagged this guy with another $170,000 from what was going on in the partnership. And then that gets tagged to him individually. And because he was married and he filed a joint return for the 2017 tax year, it goes to his wife, who had absolutely no understanding, knowledge. And it's a very bizarre situation because this guy actually cut ties with the partnership a year or two before 2017, and so then the parties separated and got divorced. So while the IRS is doing the audit of the partnership, the wife and husband were divorced, and she had absolutely no idea that there was even an audit going on. And the first she heard about this was a notice she got from the IRS saying you owe $170,000.
Wow, I bet that was pretty scary. I'm glad she called you. I would have probably done the same thing. Hell, what do I do with this?
Sure. Exactly. So we got that one at the IRS, and that's been sitting there for at least 6 months now without, we haven't heard anything back from the IRS, but that's not unusual either. We send these things in, it stops all collection activity.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So, so okay, you owe $170,000, but we're not going to file a notice of federal tax lien on you. We're not going to levy on you. We're going to consider this, and then we're going to, at the end of the day, we're going to figure out what to do next.
So that would be like the first step is filing the petition to stop them from coming after you until you can sort it all out, get your proof into them, whatever else you need to do, let them take their time to evaluate it, and they cannot lien your property or do anything else to you during that time period. So it is a good tool to know that if you think there's a chance you can prove this fraudulent behavior on the basis of your ex, then go ahead and get that filed, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Get that petition into the IRS.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is with the IRS, so it's federal. Is there anything they can do for state? Or is that state by state?
It is state by state, and we're in California, you and I, and the Franchise Tax Board is the one that takes care of that. And they have a very similar process. Okay. And they do ask what happened at the federal level, and they ask for, your petition to the feds and whatnot. And I have to say, in general, I am not a fan of the FTB. It is
nobody is.
The IRS is a big teddy bear compared to the FTB. And the FTB, is much less transparent than the IRS. It moves much more quickly against taxpayers, but generally takes a much longer time in doing things that could help you. But I will say in their favor that my experience with the FTB and innocent spouse is they're pretty good. They are quite responsive and reasonable, and and there's always somebody that you can talk to who has the case and will explain their reasoning. So
assigned to a person, there's a live body. It's not just off into Neverland and you pray the mail got through or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's so at least on that, I give the FTB, a good score.
Well, and it's California, so we're probably a little more progressive than some other states. I would imagine this is not completely across the board, that not all states have a similar program. Is that true to your knowledge, or not necessarily?
Probably not. I mean, probably a minority of states have income tax in the first place. And so, you're rarely going to see, you will see some innocent spouse programs because the other states have sales tax, or they've got, excise taxes and stuff like this. But usually those other kinds of taxes, there's very rarely where you're going to file a joint tax return. And that's where innocent spouse comes in.
Okay. Yeah. So stepping back a minute, because if a woman is getting out of a financially abusive relationship, this is a tool she could use if this was part of the issue. If there was unpaid taxes or overdue taxes or some sort of manipulation in regard to the taxes particularly. But if she's still in a financially abusive relationship, she hasn't left yet. Is there any guidance, any suggestions, any way she can determine if there's taxes owed, or find out if something has happened that she doesn't know about that got her signature on it, or she signed but thought it was done?
So basically she has the right to find out what's going on with her own taxes by going directly to the IRS and to the FTB and saying, tell me what's going on. And, but of course it's kind of hard to just pick up the phone and call the IRS because you're going to be on hold for, 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. But, obviously as somebody practices this, I've got a bunch of ways to get information out of the IRS. So, and I've got a lot of clients where the thing I'm doing is investigating what happened. You got this notice. What does this mean? Why did this happen? I've never had the situation where the client is a woman in a financially abusive relationship where she needs to hide this from her husband. Usually they're very, they're in a situation where they can be open and above board and call me, not from a phone booth and things like this. So,
okay.
But
there is a way they could do the research and get online and see using a social security number of their own or whatever. And that's assuming that taxes are filed jointly. So would you advise married couples to file jointly? Or would
generally,
you not advise that?
Generally I do, because there's, you're generally better off in terms of the rates married filing jointly than married filing separately. Now, one wrinkle in California law that people don't know about, and even people at the FTV sometimes aren't aware of this. All your income in California is community property, unless you've got a prenup. So,
Okay.
so if you want to file married filing singly, what you have to do is you have to claim half of your income and half of your spouse's income, and the
Oh,
spouse
wow.
has to do the
Okay.
same thing.
Didn't
And
know
so,
that.
yeah, so it rarely makes any sense for somebody in California to file married filing singly.
Okay.
Where it makes sense is if you're getting income that is not your spouse's, or if you're in a situation where you fear that your spouse is going to not pay taxes. And so, so then you split it out and you're saying, 50-50, I'm responsible for 50% of the tax, and you're responsible for 50% of the tax. And, I'm signing my name to this, and you're signing your name to that. And I'm responsible for my part, and you're responsible for your part. That is, I'm sure in a lot of marriages, that's going to be a very tough conversation to have.
Right. But if a woman is in the throes of it and ready to start taking those steps to leave or to challenge the situation, it might be a way to, depending on the safety of the woman, we always go there first, is to say, listen,
Right.
I think, I'm trying to have conversations with you about money. I'm trying to discuss our finances. You are not going there with me. Therefore, I am going to do this, and you are responsible for your part. And then if you get more of a fight, then there's just more proof that this is a financially abusive relationship, because what's the number one thing people fight about? Money. So it can be just a sticky topic in a relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a financial abuse going on. But if there is, you can sort of weed it out. I've had so many women tell me, I didn't know, or I don't know. They're asking me, is this financial abuse? And, you've probably studied it enough or understand enough to see that it's very broad. It can be very, it can be this thing over here, it can be this thing over here, it can be anything in between. And so sometimes, I've written up an explanation that's the nine key indicators of financial abuse. And I still get people that are like, oh, what about this? And I'm like, yeah, I'd call that financial abuse.
That could be.
Okay, that might not be on my list, but I would say, yeah, it's sort of under this category. So I would count it. And I think that that's part of it, is that a lot of these women don't realize what's going on. They know something is wrong.
Right.
They know that this doesn't feel right. And if there is any other kind of abuse, which 98 to 99% of cases of financial abuse entail one of the other kinds of abuse. So they're probably feeling emotionally abused or, manipulated and controlled, which is what abuse is. But they don't necessarily have the words to put on the financial abuse. And if they don't have the knowledge to understand the finances and to be able to, or don't have the access to know what's going on, it can be really hard to go, oh, okay, I see that. So at least if they could go to the IRS, go to the state agency, check under their own name, see if there's any back taxes owed, that would give them a place to start to know if they need to be looking at this particular issue when they start to realize there is financial abuse going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Really good to know. Really good to know. Oh, scary stuff though.
Yeah, I guess when you were talking, it occurred to me that there's one more scenario where it makes sense to file married filing singly, which is when your husband is refusing to file a tax return. And there have been people who do that, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So then, and it would make sense. It would make perfect sense for the woman or the taxpayer to just report their own income, married filing singly, and file it. And then if the IRS or the FTB, track this to their husband, and gee, you didn't include the 50% of your husband's income, okay, fine, audit me, right? But I'm doing something to take care of my taxes and my keep my nose clean, even if my my husband or my ex can't do it.
Right. Right. And would that trigger an audit for him if the woman filed and he didn't?
Not necessarily.
No.
It might. It's because they don't always. If you're married filing singly, and they don't have another tax return for the husband, they don't always catch that. I mean, what's more likely to catch the audit is the fact that, the husband made $200,000 and there's a W-2 for him, and there's no tax return 3 years after getting that W-2.
Right. And they're watching those W-2s and auditing for
Yeah.
those tax
Yeah.
returns to match the W-2s. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you don't know, or I don't know if you said this, maybe not, but have you actually worked with women who have been financially abused? I mean, it sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And what do you advise women who are being financially abused and working on their recovery? How would you advise them to proceed in general with the bankruptcy and tax expertise that you have?
Well, have a conversation with me, because I'm going to be looking at, is it best for you to file an innocent spouse request? I'm going to charge probably more fees to do that than to do a bankruptcy. And the reason is that the bankruptcy is all about numbers. There's almost no subjectivity to it. The innocent spouse, we've got to create a narrative to send to the IRS, to a stranger essentially, and say, I was abused, believe me, and have them say, yes, you're right, and we're going to relieve you of these taxes. So it's going to be cheaper to do a bankruptcy if you can do it, if you can get rid of these tax debts. But it might be also more empowering for them to go through the process of the innocent spouse and tell their story. Right. But, they're going to be telling their story to me one way or the other. So, come on, go ahead, talk to me, take a step, because this is, recovery is a series of, long steps, one day at a time. And, and talking with me is going to be one of the first steps here. Right. And I'm happy to go through your story and figure out what's going on and point you in the best direction. There are situations where it doesn't make sense to file bankruptcy. Let's say that this woman who got the $170,000 tax debt, well, without knowing about it, well, this particular woman doesn't, but she may have a large inheritance from her mother, and so she might have $1 million sitting in the bank. And if she files bankruptcy, that's going to be taken by the trustee to pay off the IRS, because bankruptcy is all about numbers. What do you have? How much do you owe? How much do you own? We're going to take what you own and pay off what you owe. And and there's no narrative about whether it's the right thing to do or not. You're just doing it. Whereas in an innocent spouse situation, we're saying, oh yeah, you've got $1 million. We know this. The IRS knows this, and you owe $170,000. But is it right for you to pay $1 million, to pay off that $170,000? Oh, you're saying it's not right. Let's figure this out. And the IRS is, like I said, they're pretty good about trying to figure these things out.
Yeah, so that's good to know, because if you do come out of a relationship with resources, and some women do, you don't want to end up having to pay the debt of your ex, because that could end up putting you in a hardship yourself, or like you said, it's just plain unfair. It continues the abuse. Essentially, they get away with their bad behavior and you have to pay their debt. And we're trying to empower these women to take back their own strength and take back their own financial savvy and get in front of all these things and stop supporting him and his bad behavior, for lack of a better word. Not paying your taxes,
Exactly. So, yeah.
Okay. So what is something that you could offer? What would you suggest to women to protect themselves from financial abuse? Do you have any suggestions?
Boy, that's tough, because, I guess, that you get into these situations unconsciously, right? And then you wake up and realize what's going on, and there's immediately the sense of shame and victimhood. And, to protect yourself from this, stay aware of what's going on. We hear the slogan nationally, freedom isn't free. Well, that applies in individual relationships, right? I mean, you've got this other person that you're dealing with all the time. And, if you let the power struggle go like this, and you become the victim and you don't think about this, things are not going to go well. So, push back, take courageous steps in whatever relationship you've got. and speak up where you see something being unfair. And for better, I mean, I don't want to be victim shaming or blaming the victim, but grow a spine and take some steps to not be victimized all the time. And if you're in that situation, it's absolutely devastatingly hard, right? Take very small steps. No, I don't want to have that for dinner tonight. We're having, I'm cooking. I'm going to cook this, and and put your foot down, and understand that the consequences may be harrowing from doing that. But, if you stand your ground just a little bit, it makes it easier the next time. And this is all a process, like I said, a process of recovery, a process of one step at a time, and changing the tenor of what's going on in the relationship.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with you. I never like to victim blame either, but I also think we all have to take a look in the mirror and see how we are culpable, because it might be just that allowing it to happen. And that's the strength you have to find to set those boundaries and say, this is not acceptable. I'm going to go file my single tax return and you can do what you want. And that's just a boundary, but it's stepping up and owning your own and not allowing it to continue. And I'm a big proponent of, I don't want you to be a victim, but you have to learn how not to be a victim too. Right. And that's kind of how I approach it, is that I was a victim for a long time. And I was able to change the narrative by building my self-esteem. That's where it started for me, was realizing that I could not change him. I was never going to change him. As much as I loved him, it wasn't going to make any difference. And I had to get the strength to take care of myself and start over, really literally with nothing. And that's why I'm on this journey, is to help other women, because it is so challenging to leave an abusive relationship. And I was not being physically abused. And that's even worse in a lot of ways. But emotional abuse certainly tears down your self-esteem and just undermines you. And they are so manipulative, that the gaslighting and the things that go on that make you not really trust yourself. And it's a whole other conversation there, John, and I'd love to go there with you. But just one more question, two more questions. What advice would you give women who are in a financially abusive relationship and are working on financially recovering, or are trying to get out? Is there any other steps that you would suggest to a woman trying to get out, other than what you just said?
Boy, I would say that these are very difficult situations, and and it takes an awful lot of feeding and nurturing your soul and being spiritual. And so I guess I would suggest, you feed yourself by looking for inspiration someplace. Read Tina Turner's biography. I just read a great story in Atlantic. I mean, it's not about financial abuse, but it's the cover story this month is about a woman from Kentucky who grew up and, her mom was a crackhead, and how she got herself to being an editor. She's now an editor at Atlantic. And, what was that journey like? And, and see other people who have done a similar journey, people who have come out of blackness, out of darkness, and into a more lit place. I'm in my own life, I've been a member of 12-step groups. They are fantastic. And I don't know if there's an abusees anonymous or anything like that, but
well, there's Codependence Anonymous. That's
Codependence, and Al-Anon and whatnot, and those
kind of go towards that, lean in that direction, I believe. Yeah.
And and for myself, this is probably going to seem very strange in the context of everything, but I am a practicing Catholic who feels like I'm moving more and more toward traditional Catholicism, and I feel like it's very much in tune with helping people recover from things like this. And so find something that's going to help you. Find something that's going to nourish you. Find something something that's going to help you put your sights on something more transcendental than just I'm looking for a materially better life. Obviously we do need a materially better life. We need to be fed. We need to, get away from being under somebody's thumb. We need to get away from oppression. But, that doesn't matter if you don't have a goal that you're going toward. And so, so I would say open your eyes up to something more inspiring, more spiritual.
Okay, good. I like that. It's heartwarming. It's like, and part of the reason I like to talk to you, John, is as a man, I like to bring men into the group, and obviously you can't join the group, but in these interviews,
Right. Yeah.
so that women see that there are men out there that are on our side, that are trying to fight for us as well, because I see this
Right.
as a collaboration with many, many different resources and many, many different people addressing it in their own little way and trying to just gather as many of us into the same field as we can to offer women suggestions and ideas and resources and information and education. And that's really so perfect for what you've done today with us, is explain the innocent spouse law. I'm so excited to share this interview with the group. And I think it's really such a pertinent piece of it for so many women. Just real quickly, we did have a woman between when you and I first talked in this meeting post in the group that she had filed an innocent spouse petition requesting relief for $300,000 in debt owed on joint taxes, and she was granted that petition.
Excellent. Yeah.
She thinks that he got all the notices, and because they came from the IRS, he simply didn't open them. So even though he had to be notified, she kind of figured he probably never opened the notices. And I thought, oh, yeah, if it's coming from the IRS and he's trying to cheat the IRS, he wouldn't open them. It makes perfect sense. So I was really happy to hear that, as we were bringing this topic up in the group, there was someone who said, yes, I've been successful at doing this. And I'm so excited to share that with the group as well, because we need those successes. We need those wins. We need to know that this does work. And especially, like you said, looking for mentors or people or situations that can guide you and encourage you. And that's a lot about what this group is for. And so, John, I appreciate that, because you've done that today. You've offered women another option, another opportunity for fairness and to fight back and to stand their ground. And you've encouraged us all to really understand. I mean, it starts with understanding, and I keep learning. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this a long time, and I still keep learning. So I'm excited about that. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with the group before we go? Anything else that you would, of course, we'll share your contact information and let the group reach out to you if they're interested in asking you more questions and finding out how you might be able to help in an individual case. But is there anything else you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, I guess one thing you just mentioned, you talked about this woman who got the $300,000 of relief, and and her ex got notified. Well, they're going to notify your ex. But the IRS is also very good about asking, are you afraid of this person? Okay. They are very good about not revealing where you are. And they're very highly trained on this. They are not going to, they're going to ask for your ex's side of the story. And they've seen all kinds of people who are grinding axes, and they've seen people who are out to get revenge and stuff like that. And they've got a pretty good BS detector for this kind of stuff. In general, it's not a great idea to trust bureaucracies, but on this thing, they seem to be doing a pretty good job. I'm really glad to hear that. They really kind of take the side of the innocent spouse, and unless they really look at this and say, this person is just being opportunistic about trying to get rid of some taxes, and she really owes a lot, and she should. If they see that, then they're not going to be very merciful. But in general, they're pretty good about weeding out the wheat from the chaff.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. I appreciate you sharing that with everyone, and thank you so much for being here today, John. This has been an enlightening conversation, and I really hope that the women in the group enjoy it and get something out of it and can learn from it. And hopefully, if anyone is looking for this kind of a resource, John, you are a bankruptcy and tax attorney, and you specialize in the innocent spouse law, so you are a resource that the group can reach out to if they need to. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Happy to help people out.
We'll post your contact information along with this video, and they can certainly reach out directly to you. All right. Thank you, John.